I would like to introduce you to my next guest, Janice Kaplan. She is the author of What Your Body Knows About Happiness: Unexpected Ways to Find Gratitude, Happiness, and Joy. It was such a fabulous conversation with her. She talked about many, many things. And a couple things that really stuck out to me were she said to me, and she gives this example in the book, which is it. There's so many examples that but this one is really cool. She said, close your eyes and think about a time when you were happy and felt a general sense of bliss and well-being. Go ahead, I'll wait. In Paris, we weren't just tasting the wine, we were drinking in the ambiance. You think you are loving what is in the glass, but your senses are drinking in all the experiences around you. This was just one of the many examples that she and I shared. And her book is so thorough. She brings lots of experiments and stories to reinforce the power of happiness. She says there's a language in happiness, the discovery of how we can use our physical selves and environment to change our creativity, outlook, success, and our happiness. It's time to know how the body and mind work together so that we can increase our joy every day and find new ways to shine. She's talking about the mind and the body connection, which is right up my alley because I love the somatic part of living where the body is sharing and showing and asking us to listen to it, to tap into it, to find out where our pain is and to find out also where our joy is. This episode is a lovely, lovely conversation with Janice, and I would like to invite you to that right now. So please join me as Janice and I talk about her book, What Your Body Knows About Happiness. It was very, very meaningful. And I know there will be people who read this and feel the same. I've done so much somatic work and work in, the body and what the body's feeling and how my body is connected to my experiences and to my life. And this was the topper and very unexpected for me. I wasn't thinking that that would happen. And yet you've just ushered me into this beautiful reality of what our bodies do and how they support us. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And this book was a joy to write for exactly that reason. And I'm glad it helps you, and I hope it helps other people also.
Well, it did, and I just want to read the first page because you said it starts and it really frames what you're speaking about. So here's how it reads. Traveling to a vacation with my husband recently, we faced an endless day of lost luggage and inexplicable airport delays. I stood in the tiny airport where we finally landed, feeling frustrated and grumpy. In desperation, need more of a positive view right then, or sorry, I desperately needed a more positive view right then. I decided to try a little gratitude exercise. I took a deep breath. I could handle this. Our luggage is lost, but at least I have a bathing suit in my carry-on bag, I brightly said to my husband. He laughed, and I calmed down. Enough to get out of the airport without bursting into tears. But it wasn't until we finally got onto a small motorboat to whisk us to our island location that I truly relaxed. The sun sparkled on the ocean, and the warm air blew gently against my face. Barely 10 minutes on the water, and I felt blissfully happy, as if nothing frustrating had at all occurred. The sudden elation felt wonderful, and it got me thinking about what was happening. In this setting, I didn't need to make a conscious decision to be grateful and positive. My body was sending the happiness message on its own. And I love that because this whole book is all about experiences, research, bringing doctors in to share about the different ways our body brings in happiness. It's almost as if you're reminding us how good our bodies actually are.
Right, and, thank you for reading that. It's fun to hear. It's absolutely true. It is exactly what happened, and what I'm trying to point out in the book is that we have a mind-body partnership, and we all tend to be very focused in our brains. We are very mind-centric people, and we kind of forget that our brain is really, however wonderful it is, it's really a 3-pound mass stuck up there in a very dark skull.
Mm.
And it can only get the information that is being sent to it from your senses, from your environment, from what's going on inside of your body. And your brain then interprets that information. And we understand how sometimes it interprets it and makes you unhappy, right? Get a splinter in your finger, you're in someplace dark and gloomy, you're
Yeah.
going to feel bad. But for some reason, we have a hard time understanding that those messages of happiness and gratitude and joy can also be sent through our bodies.
That's very true. And you bring us through different ways of seeing this through your own personal experiences, which, you talk about back pain, you talk about and then you move to an experiment or a research or a study that, a university doctor has where we're talking about a hot coffee cup.
Well, some of the things that are almost implicit to us that when we're feeling cold or upset or scared, it does feel good to have something warm. And the research that you're referring to, and by the way, I do like to take people along on my journey and not just to write it as a
Yeah.
cold book. So I like to tell my own stories. I do a lot of research, but I also like to interview the researchers and let my readers kind of come with me and hear what they have to say directly rather than quoting these sometimes obscure papers. But the warmth research was fascinating. It was a professor named John Barge out of Yale who had done something where he invited volunteers to come to his lab. And while they were on their way up in the elevator, an associate either gave them a cold cup of coffee to hold or a warm cup of coffee to hold. And they didn't know that that was part of the research. They got to his lab and they were given descriptions of people and they were asked their impressions of them. And it turned out that the people who were given the warm coffee to hold described the people as being much warmer and kinder than those who had been given the cold coffee to hold. And it sounds a little crazy, but it may be that our bodies think in metaphors. And so you're holding something warm, the sense of warmth is infiltrating up to your brain, and your brain gets kind of a little mixed up with what it's feeling and what it's expressing with somebody else. Now, if you asked any of those volunteers, do you think you were influenced by the coffee that you held a few minutes ago? They would say, absolutely not. Of course not. I'm being very rational in how I evaluate this person, but it's just not what happens. We are influenced by all of those things that we touch and see and feel.
And it's very true. We are influenced by how what we touch, see, and feel. And you really do bring us along with your stories and with the research. You wrote gratitude diaries and you talked about perspective, that gratitude is really, it is just this thing that we can feel that can make us brighter, that can help us feel something other than the situation that we're in. And I think that sometimes we overlook the power of happiness as well. And I went on this little rabbit trail myself looking for how do you define gratitude and happiness, and are they connected? What are your findings?
Well, when I wrote the gratitude diaries, my sense was that happiness can actually be fleeting. And, if you have an ice cream cone, if I have an ice cream cone, I'm going to be happy. Um, but that may not last for very long. The power of gratitude is that it has a much deeper resonance and it gives you also a sense of control. You don't have to worry about whether you have that ice cream cone or not. You Realize that it's not just the events and the situations you're in, but what your attitude is towards them, the perspective that you bring, the framing that you bring. So, I sometimes feel that if we're waiting for events to make us happy, we're going to have to wait a really long time. But if we're in a situation where we say, I can stop right now, whatever is going on, and say, what's the positive in this? There has to be some positive. There has to be something good here. And once you do that, it gives you that sense of control back. Happiness, despite the title of my book, I think is probably better described as well being. And I think well being is the phrase that I use throughout my new book, because that is really what we're talking about, that slightly deeper sense of feeling good in every part of your body and mind.
It is true. And I like the well-being sense, the well-being word, because it brings us into a um happiness can be, like you say, it's really in the eye of the beholder. Like, if you're in a state of crisis, finding happiness can be really difficult. And I've had that in my life where, I'm thinking about some things in my life where it's really difficult, but then I'm in another situation where I don't want to carry that through. I want to be more in that feeling space. And this really offers us an understanding about all kinds of things, the senses, the touch, the feel, the way a new perspective gives us a space in the opening of whatever our crisis is or our moment is.
Right. And, with the gratitude diaries, it really was about reframing situations, getting a new perspective. And I continue to think that's very important. I think the power of this book, What Your Body Knows About Happiness, is that it gives you another tool in the arsenal, which is that you can change how your body feels.
Yes.
So, sometimes you can, if you're feeling low, if you're upset about something, if you're walking down the street and you're annoyed. I find this sometimes. I'm walking down the street and you realize you're getting more and more crouched over,
Yes.
and you're slumping more and more. I will physically make myself stop and stand up straighter, and maybe even give a little bit of a fake smile, because there's really good research showing that when you sit up straighter, when you stand up straighter, you're better able to access positive emotions. And it makes sense because when you're depressed, you naturally slouch. And so your brain starts to identify that. Your brain, which is constantly scanning your body for information, goes, "Ooh, slouching, must be unhappy here." And when you're standing up straight, sitting up straight, it's easier to access positive feelings and positive emotions. That's a little small thing, a little gift that you can give yourself when you're, as I said, walking down the street or feeling lousy at your computer. The research on smiling goes back a very long time.
Mm.
And that when you make yourself smile, there's what's called the facial feedback hypothesis, which says that the expression on our face is constantly being read by our brain. Interestingly enough, there's some research showing that people who use Botox um, are less likely to get unhappy because they can't put their face into an expression of misery. And so their brain is not getting that signal from the face of misery.
That was fascinating to me. When I read that, I thought that totally makes sense. It was very interesting. And what you're saying, though, is that there's a language in this happiness. That's what was really happening. We have a language here that can connect both our body and how we think about ourselves and in that situation. So, your warmth of your hands on a cup of coffee, like you said, straightening up. I did these things when I was reading the book. I went, okay, is this true? And I hunched over, and it was so interesting. It was fascinating to be exposed to that. It's not something I really thought about.
I think that's so much of what it is that we're just not aware of those things. And once you start thinking about them, they seem pretty simple, but it's just not something that we're aware of or that we think about. And once it becomes part of your habits, your thoughts, it's very exciting how much better you can make yourself feel, how you can decide, to go outside, to take a walk, to do the things that are going to improve that well-being.
Yeah, you talk about one way to prove your well-being is by looking at colors. Like colors are very foundational. And I was in the later chapters, there was this, you were in an art gallery, I believe, and your friend said, I could just like, I could just buy anything right now. But it was not that was the possibility. The art was very pricey. But what captivated your friend was the experience, the color, the influence of the outside world, and kind of bringing that into the inner world.
Right. And there are certain things like color, like open spaces, like high ceilings, like sunlight streaming in that just make us happier. And, there are lots of explanations for it in terms of dopamine and serotonin and things that get our hormones going or our chemicals changing. I think some of it we actually don't completely understand. Some of it may be deeply wired, some of it may be from evolutionary biology. Um, some of it may be what's happening on our retinas and being sent to our brains. But I think if you start to pay attention to it, if you start to be aware of it, and yes, if when you're in that art gallery, you realize, gosh, I just feel so elated. I want to buy everything. I'm so excited here. And you think, well, what is it? What is making me happy? And maybe it is the colors, maybe it is the openness and the open spaces. And then you realize that you have a place that you can go back to make yourself happier, or you can realize those little things that you can change that will do that also.
I It's really interesting when you say that, we can realize that there are little things that we can change, because we we know all of this. You are presenting it to us, to me, sort of to say, well, I felt like it was more of an awareness. Wake up, take a look. Here's what we really have. Here's the beauty of what we've been given. And sometimes when we are in the social media world, and we are, very, you mentioned it, you said, when you were doing the research, how you were flipping through, you were trying to write, I believe, and you kept checking your emails, and kept sort of this distraction idea of how we are so distracted from what we're doing. And there's this immediacy that follows it. Would you say that the distraction takes some of the focus off of the happiness, or would you say it's sort of both?
I think you can start to figure out how you use distraction to make yourself happy. So, what's the positive side? And maybe it's not always distraction, but what you're describing is that we are indeed wired to pay attention to something new when it changes. Our brains, great as they are, like the idea of keeping everything very unchanging. So,
Yeah.
if it's the status quo, your brain is, which is, as I said, is scanning. It's going, everything looks good here, everything looks familiar, don't have to change anything.
Yeah.
Your brain and body and mind will wake up when something is different. Now, that's what happens in a very negative way on social media. There's always something new that's distracting you, that's grabbing your attention. It's like if you're sitting in a lecture hall and somebody walks into the room, you're going to turn your attention away from the person who's talking and see who walked in, because it's a natural instinct to see, is that a danger? What is over there? And that's what social media does in that kind of constant distraction. But how about if we turn it around and we say, okay, newness stimulates us, but how about if we look for the things where newness stimulates us in a good way? So I think today I'm going to drive to the store in a different direction than I usually have. Or I'm going to go to a different part of town than I usually visit. Or I'm going to go to the farmer's market and get a fruit that I've never eaten before and have a new taste in my life.
Mm.
So those are the little things that can actually be a newness, a difference that give you a shot of happiness, a shot of excitement, a shot of a newness in a good way in your life. So I just think that's a nice way to flip it around.
Yeah, I like that flip. I really do. And you bring about this focus about pain. Uh, I and then I went to the dentist yesterday, and I'm having this hygienist appointment, and she's cleaning my teeth in a space where normally I'm really sensitive. I have really sensitive teeth. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do exactly what Janice says. And I sat there, and she kind of got confused at the end and she says, "Okay, hold on, Laura, I need to do some more examination." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, because you're not your chart says that this is really sensitive." And she said, "But you're not flinching." And in my head, I said, "That does hurt a little, but it's not enough to overreact and to flinch." And I just began to feel something different. And she then said to me, "You know what? You're healing. How great is that?"
I love that story. That's absolutely wonderful. And the point that's so important is that any feeling you have, whether it's at the dentist, whether it's a back pain, whatever it is, the pain circuit goes through your head.
Yeah.
And so the pain, the actual whatever is happening in your mouth or your back, that's not going to change, but you can change how your brain processes it. And you were dealing with something on an immediate basis, and it's wonderful that you were able to do it that way. So much of the research has been done with people who are feeling chronic pain,
Yeah.
because chronic pain turns out to go through a different part of the brain than acute pain or an acute feeling like you were dealing with yesterday. And once the pain has moved from, oh, I wrenched my back out raking leaves and it really hurts. Yes, it does. um, but in a couple of weeks, that actual physical pain is going to have healed. But the circuit going to your brain has not. And what happens is that the brain continues sending this hurts, this hurts, this hurts long after the actual localized pain should have gone away. And so, what pain researchers are finding now is that one of the best ways to get people to deal with pain is to understand that and is to say, this is my brain tricking me. And to almost have fun with it. And I love your story because that's what you did at the dentist yesterday. You said, okay, this is my brain telling me that my tooth or my gums or whatever hurt. And yeah, I can feel it, but it's not that bad. It's going to be over in a few minutes. I'm not going to, worry about it. And it's the worry and the fear sometimes that are the worst part of it and that really make our brains become even more activated and send even more signals of pain.
Well, this on the signal of pain piece, it got me thinking about narratives because, we are telling ourselves a story oftentimes and about what we're feeling or what the pain we're experiencing. So then we can actually transform some of that by rewording it, by reframing it. If I've got a headache, I'm thinking, I woke up this morning, I had a slight headache, and I said to myself, yeah, my brain's full. It's full. So this has really become, like, over the last week, it's just become very interesting to me. I'm thinking, wow, you've really had an effect on me. Thank you very much.
I am completely thrilled to hear that, and I really love that. And I think it's true also because one of the things that causes pain is worrying about pain.
Yeah.
So let's say you get a cold, um, and you're worried. What do I have? Do I have this virus? Do I have that virus? What could it be? How long am I going to be sick? I have that meeting in 3 days. Am I going to be better? If somebody says to you, now, my husband's a doctor, so I have this often. I'll say, "Oh, I'm so sick, and I have that meeting in 3 days. What am I going to do?" And he'll say, "Oh, I've been seeing so many people with this. You're going to feel lousy for 2 days, and really on the third day, you're going to be okay. It's really something that lasts about 2 days. Fine, no longer worried about it. And those 2 days aren't as big a deal anymore because it's like, okay, I'm going to get over this and it's not terrible. So I think once we can understand and have a different perspective on our pain or on our situations, we can be in control of those too.
We can be in control of those. And there's a great example in the book where I believe this was an athlete and went into the doctor's office and the ball of his foot
Mhm.
was sore and there was some, and so he goes in, he's on crutches or whatever, and the doctor says this will be better in a few days, and he just walked out.
It was one of my
Because
favorite stories too. Yeah.
it was brilliant. I just kind of stopped for a second and I went, wow. So then where does mind over matter come in?
Well, in that particular story, it was told to me by a wonderful doctor who's the head of pain at Stanford University and has done fascinating and wonderful research. And I was actually very grateful for the time he spent with me. And it was such a funny story as he told it to me because it was an athlete, as you said, and he was a tennis player. And he had been told that if he continued to walk on his foot, he was going to destroy himself and he would never be able to play tennis again, and he'd end up in a wheelchair. And so he came in and he was just devastated and so scared. And once the this doctor diagnosed it, told him what it was, and said to him, it's, yeah, it's going to hurt for a while. It takes a little while for this to get better, but you can't hurt yourself further with this. And he said, I'm not going to end up in a wheelchair if I walk. He said, no. He said, I'm not going to, never be able to play tennis again if I run on it. He said, no. And then the athlete said, we're done here, put down his crutches, and as you said, walked out. So I do think that it's such a reminder that pain is not an absolute. It's not, we've done a disservice by, those signs that you sometimes see in the hospitals, which says with a pain chart and, where's your pain on 1 to 10?
Right.
Well, what does that mean?
Your
You know,
pain is different than my pain, right?
Exactly, exactly. And there's been all sorts of research where people will have a hot towel or a hot something put on their arm, and that is really hot enough to be painful. And they'll be asked how what the number is. And people respond very dramatically, very differently. It's the same sensation that's going to your spinal cord that's feeling it, but once it gets up to the brain, it's interpreted differently.
Well, this is true, and evidenced by one more story that was so fabulous to me. The runner who broke their femur.
Mhm.
That was just, they didn't know. They felt a searing hot pain and felt like their leg was jelly, and yet they did what they needed to do. There's this the body does know what it is doing, and it knows how to heal. It knows its self. How has this been, um how has this shaped you as you've journeyed through this? Like, what has changed for you?
Well, I am so much more aware of my environment and of the things I do and of how I feel about things. It's changed what I think about eating. I talk in the book about how the first taste of something is really what gives us the most pleasure. And so often what we focus on is how much it is, how much of it there is. And
Yeah.
I think it was a researcher out of the UK who I was talking to about that, and he described it as when you're eating a bowl of chocolate mousse and you taste the first bite and it is great. It is, absolutely delicious. And you taste the second bite, still really good. Third bite, you're starting to get used to it a little bit. Fourth bite, really used to it. By the bottom of the bowl, you're almost tired of it, but you're still eating away. And he said, your pleasure in that is not the average of, it is not the sum of all those bites, it's the average of it. So if you stop when you're still really enjoying it, you're going to remember that as being a really memorable dessert. And it's a lovely way to start thinking about it. And I've tried to do that and to be more aware of the pleasure you take in the first few bites of things. And I like chocolate and I like dessert, and I'm starting to go, I can have just a couple of bites of that, and that's where the real pleasure comes.
That's beautiful. Well, wine is always better in Paris, as you say.
Absolutely. And
Because you're taking that in, right? The external does influence the internal.
right, when you drink wine in Paris, you're not just drinking the wine, right?
Yeah.
You're drinking the beauty of of where you are. You're drinking the sense of romance of the place. You're drinking in the charm of the cafe. And go home and try to buy that same bottle of wine. It's just not going to drink the same at home as it did in Paris.
It's not, and you were also mentioning the studies where they give you a really good bottle of wine, like the label, and then they take out the good bottle of the good wine and they pour in, something that's less. And sometimes people go, "Oh, it just tastes amazing." Yes, of course, this wine is amazing when it's really a a cheaper wine or a less expensive. It's very interesting to see as you bring these things up that you just go, wow, I'm really influenced by a lot of different things.
And you know what's fascinating about the wine, and yes, there is so much research on that, that what you think the wine is has an influence on how you feel about it, how you think it tastes. But it's when they put people into fMRI machines, scanning their brains are actually responding differently. So, you know, we almost think it's like, oh, well, that's a bad thing. I'm talking myself into something.
Right.
This is silly. And
Yeah.
but it's the wrong way to think about it, because what's happening is your body is powerful, your brain is powerful, they're working together. And if I think that this is a really expensive, fabulous wine, my body is excited about it. My brain responds differently. So you actually do taste it differently than if you think it's that, cheap $3 bottle that you shouldn't be enjoying.
And we've all had it. It just seems like when you're having a really nice dinner, more expensive fits better, but it isn't always that way. Um, the Venus flytrap was very interesting to me. The genius of the Venus flytrap, I thought to myself as I read that piece, I thought, the it goes by feeling. Like the it doesn't have eyes. Well, maybe we don't know, but studies are that this it just senses, and it senses when the little insect is there, and then at the right moment. And how does it know? How does it know to lure it in and to do all the things? And I just this morning thought, wow, if I could take things in like this and begin to bring about a deeper feeling, a deeper connection, then I can nourish myself through my own means, through my own body, through my own um, sugar pill in some ways. That life can be this really beautiful thing. And I thought about, how you say that we use placebo pills for different research and ways to see how effective certain things are, and you can really, your thoughts matter, and so you don't always need to have the exact medicine for a migraine or back pain or depression, but that we can begin to feel good knowing that we're being taken care of or in our bodies. And I just found that really fascinating.
I do too. Thank you. And I think that the idea of placebos, we should think about it in a different way. We tend to think
Okay.
of placebos as being something that fools us, right? And that we're almost
Right.
embarrassed by. And I think it's so much more as you're describing it, which is that it's a good thing. What it
Yeah.
is it's saying our bodies can take care of themselves. There's very, very good research showing that I think it was 82% of the effect of antidepressant drugs is basically the placebo effect. And the drugs that get approved have to be better than that 82%. So 18% is a response to the drug. Um, and people don't like to hear that. They think that my drugs are saving me. And maybe that 18% does make a big difference for some people, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting otherwise. But we should be really happy that our bodies and brains can work together so well that they can make us better in the same way that drugs can. That 82% of the improvement that we're getting is from our own body trying to cure us rather than needing something from outside. And I think that's a lovely and powerful way to think about it.
Well, they also say that pain is a messenger. It's telling you something. The body is communicating with you, with me, with everyone who has flesh and bone. The body's saying, hey, you know, um, you have a headache. Yeah, but my brain is full. And that's the way it is. Instead of, oh yeah. I mean, I've had strong headaches before. I'm sure you have too. And how you speak about them, it's not to diminish the the chronic migraine sufferer or the headache itself, but it is to say there's always a new path um to learn. We get to create a new pathway. And sometimes we're stuck in a way of relating to our bodies, to our pain, to something that's happening. And the Venus flytrap is sort of that idea of saying, if you just blindfolded yourself and went through life, you would have to learn to feel and to begin to know what works and what doesn't. Perhaps we can bring that into our own selves, into our everyday living.
Yes, that's beautifully said. I so agree. And let me give you another example of that, of how you can use that not just with yourself, but with others. My husband and I had some silly argument one night, as couples can do, and we were just, both kind of tense, and we got into bed, and I thought for a minute, and I thought, okay, we could have a 20-minute conversation about, what just happened and how we deal with this, because it was just so silly. It wasn't, substantive. But instead, I just reached over and I rubbed his arm. I just didn't say a word. I just reached over and touched him and rubbed his arm for a minute. And you could feel all the tension in the room disappear. And that physical connection that we can have with another person is very powerful. And we sometimes forget that how we respond to somebody physically does matter.
Yes, and how not only how we respond to someone physically, but to ourselves as well.
Right,
You're
absolutely.
what you're showing us, and you're just turning the light on. It's like I just you just turn the light on to say you see all the things that you already know, but now you get to see them with this really powerful light. And that was sort of how as I began to read through and I was towards the end and I was thinking there's something that I wrote down here and it said, you had said, the place you are when you learn and hear or discover something becomes part of how you remember it. And that really struck me because, you know, everybody has their things in life, their experiences, their traumas, their past hurts and pains. And that goes into the body as a memory, as a experience. And so then when something comes up again, you can either be in that experience again or you can move yourself through a new perspective outside of that and go, hey, okay, I'm not there, I'm here. And this is how this is going to work for me. So we can rewire our happiness meter in some ways. And I just found that it was just reinforcing what I already know, and that made it seem easier and more attainable. The writing makes it more attainable with all the people that you bring that you've interviewed and said, hey, I'm thinking about color. Talk to me about color. What experiments have you done? What about this? What about that? Like this is just a masterclass in my view.
Well, thank you so much. It was a really fun book to write. And, fortunately, I'm at the point in my career when I can do the things that interest me. And
Yes.
I just loved, as you said, talking to all of these great researchers and pulling together different kinds of research. I think if I have one talent as a writer, that's it, which is finding very different things that people haven't necessarily put together before and
Right.
giving you new ways of thinking about them. And pulling in experiences and research and anecdotes, and if when you read some of it, it makes sense as you're suggesting. I think that's a great thing because it's not obscure. It's not, oh, this, I don't get this. It's really doable, and it does. I love that it's. I'm so happy that it's given you a new perspective and some takeaways and tools, and I hope everybody else who reads it feels the same way.
I hope they do as well. And as we wrap up, I loved your point about creativity. As a creative, and you are a creative as well, like the walking about connecting the mind to the body and really dropping into that space of saying to yourself, hey, I'm sitting at my desk. It's been 7 hours. I can just get up and walk around, and I might not have the immediacy of my devices and being able to write it down, but if I walk, there's going to be this creative opening that launches me into something new. I find that so often for myself. And I'm sure as a writer, that's something that works for you too.
It's so important to remember it because, when you're stuck on something or you're trying to come up with a good idea, you tend to slouch more and more over your computer, right? And go, I'm going to stay here till I figure this out.
You grind it out, you know?
I'm gonna get this.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and really, you should do the opposite because movement, the fluidity of your body leads to the fluidity of your mind. There's great research showing how creativity is inspired by being outdoors, by walking, by movement. And so, yes, free movement is really one of the best things we can do to inspire our creativity. So when you think you're feeling guilty, like I should stay at my desk, say, no, I give you absolute permission. Get up, take a walk around.
Yeah.
And it's even why, people talk about having good ideas in the shower. And that's more than a myth. It's actually true. It's what psychologists refer to as soft fascination, where there's enough going on to interest your mind, but not so much so that you're distracted. So if you're out walking or if you're in the shower, there's physical action going on, and it allows your mind to still be to be stimulated, but also to be released, to be creative. So, yeah, but in general, get up and walk around.
Get up and walk around. And you mentioned it even about our children. They're sitting at desks all day. This is how we're doing it, and we're wondering why. My boys come home from school when they were little, and it was like, what is happening? They're like little puppies,
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, so we always would have a strategy on how to, get the jeebs out of the boys because it was just like they're buzzing around, and I just hope that as we develop more as communities and in our education, that we can really appreciate um, the connection to our bodies with our learning, with academics, with how we view worlds. With you mentioned when you are in groups and listening to somebody, you'll doodle. There's a place for all of this, and so our behaviors are not weird. They're showing us something, and this is really important, I think.
Yeah, when you talk about kids, when children are tiny, when they're 2 and 3, we expect them to use their bodies to learn. We want them
Yeah.
to be in the sandbox, to be at the water table. They do finger painting. And then all of a sudden they get to kindergarten or first grade and we tell them, sit down and be quiet. And so, of course, they come home and they want to run around because nothing has changed. Um, they still need that physical way of learning. And frankly, as we were just talking about with adults, with creativity, with motion, we all still need that. So recognizing that is indeed going to be, I think, a really important part of education and of adult creativity too.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you. The um one thing that I did want you to talk about is the three ways to work on perspective of pain. And as we wrap this up, would you be able to talk to us about that? The first one is look over there. And the second one is don't make a mountain out of a mosquito. And the third one is dream a magic pain pill. And that I feel is it's appropriate.
Well, these are very specific to the pain, but yes, distraction
Yeah.
certainly helps if you're, and I guess it helps not just with pain. If you're unhappy about anything, distraction, turn on some music, do something physical, do a different kind of motion, something to get you away from whatever you're currently ruminating on or worrying about, whether it's a back pain or an anxiety problem. Remind me, what was the second one there?
Oh, the second one is
Don't
don't
make a
make
mosquito.
a mosquito.
Right. Yeah, that was based on the story of somebody who had a mosquito bite, and by the time she got to the doctor, she had convinced herself that it was a major skin cancer, which which I
Yeah.
think is something we all do, right? We start to worry about something, and the worrying only makes it worse. So, with pain, with other issues, it's hard to turn off the worrying. I understand that, but once you tell yourself that you're not doing yourself any good that way and you're only making it worse, that can be a big help. There was
Yeah.
one finding that was so interesting where they were looking at postoperative pain. And the number one likelihood, a cause of postoperative pain was not what the surgery was. It was not what the skill of the surgeon was. It was how much the person expected to be in postoperative pain and how much they worried about it.
Right.
So if you're worrying about it ahead of time, there's a good chance you're going to make it happen.
Very
So,
interesting.
yeah.
And then the third is the dream of a magic pain pill. I love that.
That was a little trick that I did way back when I was in college, and I was sick, and I was in whatever was the in college hospital infirmary, and I was probably 19, and I remember lying there and thinking, oh, I was so sick. I'm thinking, all right, if you had one pain pill to take in your whole life, you could have it. Would you take it right now? And then even at 19, I was smart enough to say, no, I'm, I'm going to be able to get through this. Everybody has told me I'm going to be better in a week. And yeah, I'm in pain right now, but there's probably going to be something much worse in my life. I was young enough to understand that, who knew what was ahead. And certainly I got better then. And I've used that little trick ever since. And it's funny how helpful it is because I'll think, okay, you have that one pain pill in your life. Do you want to take it? Now, by the way, it is imaginary. Um, do you want to take it right now? And my answer is always like, no, this isn't so bad. I can cope with this. There'll probably be something worse. And it does just take you down a notch, right? Because what you tend to do is to catastrophize things and say, nobody has ever been this sick. Nothing has ever felt this bad. This is the worst it could ever be. And once you remind yourself, like, yeah, actually, I can get through this, it does help.
Well, every flu I have is the sickest I've ever been.
But I
It's
bet you
the
wouldn't have
sickest
taken
I've
my
ever
magic pain
been.
pill.
So what what do you want us to know? The final thing. What is it that if you could just summarize this, what is it for us? What was your heart here?
I would say, do understand that your body and mind work together, that it's a great partnership, and that you can use your body to make yourself happier with everything from sitting up straighter to smelling some flowers to putting yourself in a beautiful place to taking a walk. Just start being aware of the things that your body can do, the messages that it's sending, and use them for good, and use them to give yourself the joy and happiness and well-being that you deserve.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it. Use your body for joy and happiness and well being that you deserve. I love that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it.
A great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.